We will not get food. We are not having any transport. It's really hard to see somebody die without medicine. So this is our last fight. We are putting up our last fight.
Hello and welcome to Stephanomics, the podcast that brings the global economy to you. And what you heard there was desperation on the streets of Sri Lanka, a country now so broke it shut down its schools for 2 weeks on Monday, along with a significant chunk of the government, in a last-ditch effort to save fuel. The International Monetary Fund team arrived that same day to begin negotiations over a possible bailout, but a rescue looks quite far off because the IMF's economists are still struggling to see how the country could ever get on top of its debts. And if Sri Lanka is at one end of the global economic spectrum today, Qatar is definitely at the other. I've been in Doha for the Qatar Economic Forum, and you'd have to say the war in Ukraine had treated them very well, with Europe now scrambling to source gas from Qatar, not President Putin. The world even seems to be coming round to the idea of the Gulf state hosting this year's World Cup. Bloomberg's Simone Foxman has a report in a few minutes on the many billions the Qataris have spent making this tournament a success. She also asks whether it's remotely plausible to expect a lasting legacy in the form of stronger worker rights. But first, here is our South Asia government reporter Sudhi Ranjan Sen in Colombo.
The streets of Colombo, the capital of Sri Lanka, are ringing with protest. For months, a foreign currency crisis has devastated this island nation. Fuel is hard to come by. It could take days in a line to get fuel or cooking gas. Food prices have skyrocketed. The price of bread has trebled in the last few months. Cooking gas is scarce and many are back to using firewood. Now, people want answers. How did Sri Lanka, a lodestar for economic development in Asia, fall so far? I am on the streets at Golface Green, the iconic street meandering past the sea. Thousands of people have gathered and many more are marching in. The crowds are shouting in unison around me, calling their leaders thieves and puppets.
First, give me your name and what do you do? You're an IT engineer.
Yeah, I'm Naomi Gurusinghe. And
I met Naomi Gurusinghe, a young software engineer, at the demonstration. Both her parents are sick and she's struggling to get hold of medicine they need.
we, the citizens, have come to a position that we rather die or put up a fight, because we will not get food, we are not having any transport, we will not get any internet, mostly we don't have medicine. It's really hard to see somebody die without medicine, because you have the money, you don't have a place to buy the medicine. So this is our last fight. We are putting up our last fight.
Like many others, Naomi directs her anger at the Rajapaksa family and blames him for the country's worst economic meltdown in decades.
So you may know, but I will repeat it. Our president, our prime minister, and most of our MPs belongs to the same family, Rajapaksa family. We are under a corrupted regime.
The Rajapaksas have been at the helm of Sri Lanka for over 2 decades. Until recently, as many as 6 Rajapaksas held top government positions, oversee 70% of the national budget. That includes President Gotabaya Rajapaksa.
So if the corrupted regime is still in power, we will be not having any hope. Funds will also be mismanaged. So we can see that they have mismanaged.
But removing the president won't save every problem. Sri Lanka's crisis is years in the making. Problems traced to Rajapaksa's first days in office. After his election in 2019, he slashed taxes to boost local business, making good on a populist campaign promise.
Today, people are crushed under the heavy weight of taxes. We hope to change the income tax law, which no longer suits the country, and reduce the tax burden for everyone. Instead of multiple taxes, we will introduce a single one. We will abolish the pay-as-you-earn income tax on workers at the state and private sectors.
But when the pandemic hit, the economy took a tumble. Remittances and tourism dollars dried up, pinching off revenue and forcing the central government to print money. The government also decided to transition to organic farming at the worst time possible. A ban on import of chemical fertilizer pretty much finished Sri Lanka's agricultural sector. In the background, increased indebtedness to China for infrastructure projects has not helped. To top it off, the tax cut that Rajapaksa posted 2 years ago totally backfired. The nation's foreign exchange reserves are depleted. Last month, the nation defaulted on payments for the first time since 1948. That was when it achieved independence from the British Empire. To stay afloat, economists estimates that Sri Lanka needs as much as $6 billion this year from the International Monetary Fund and major creditors including China, Japan and India. Now, President Rajapaksa and his ministers are trying to secure a bailout from the IMF, but people don't feel confident about the future. Last month, inflation neared 40%. Here is Naomi again.
Yeah, this is my last fight. This country has never been defaulted and now the country is default. And we are going through tough time. The general public is going through tough time. My industry is failing and we have problems finding our normal day-to-day transport, food and medicine. So I might also migrate even though I'm here fighting. Okay, this is my last fight. I'm putting up my last fight for my life.
Protesters are making waves. Now the president is the only Rajapaksa left in office. His brother Mahinda, a strongman who served as prime minister, resigned last month. Hours later, violence would engulf the nation. Meanwhile, political opponents are also putting pressure on the Rajapaksa government.
Just let me give you my card. So you are the...
She's a bureau chief.
Okay.
I report on
bureau chief for Bloomberg.
In Sri Lanka.
Okay.
Sajid Premadasa is the leader of the largest opposition party. He said even though Sri Lanka is technically a democracy, today's issues are part of a deeper rot.
When you look at the causes of the present economic devastation, one of which is power concentration, singular decision making, power concentrated in the hands of the executive, his stooges, his cohorts and surrogates. You can't have this type of decision making being further perpetuated because it may be the cause of many more crises.
So what's the solution, and does Sri Lanka even have a roadmap? Sajid tells me his party is ready to push for the president to step down and for a fresh mandate. But he's also worried about other important stuff.
We are only worried about the people suffering. That's all. We don't go around brandishing the word elections, elections, elections. People don't want elections, they want solutions. But at the end of the day, to resolve this, if I may use an American political term, gridlock, I think a fresh mandate is the only answer. But there again, we have to look at least having some sort of basic communities for people to live. We have to ensure that human lives are preserved and that people are able to live. There should be livability.
For now, Sri Lanka is struggling to keep its head above the water. On one hand, President Rajapaksa has made it clear he's not going anywhere before his term ends. On the other, the interim government has raised taxes again and it is pushing for a bailout from the IMF. To that end, the IMF has sent a team to Colombo this week to discuss any potential aid. But the fund is hesitant to lend money while the country's politics is still in a limbo. However the talks go, Sri Lanka is unlikely to sort out its problem anytime soon. But the day-to-day realities for Sri Lanka's 22 million people couldn't look any harsher. Authorities have warned of a severe food shortage by September, and officials are already stockpiling supplies. One thing is certain: unless the shortage of basic goods ease, the protests across the island will only grow. From Colombo, Sudhi Ranjan Sen for Bloomberg News.
So I have our chief emerging market economist here, Ziad Daoud, to chat through some of the issues raised by the Sri Lanka crisis. I mean, Ziad, we had a very clear sense from that piece of the dire straits that Sri Lanka finds itself in. And the IMF are there as we speak and actually don't seem very close to a deal at all because the numbers are so challenging for Sri Lanka. You look across the universe of all the emerging market economies. Are we going to see a lot of similar crises? Who else is in the danger zone today?
The environment for global debt for emerging markets is really not favourable, Stephanie. We have a lot of emerging markets, indeed the rest of the world, has accumulated large stock of debt since the pandemic. You have global interest rates are rising, local interest rates are rising, currencies in emerging markets are weakening, and that's increasing the burden of servicing foreign debt. And we have the default in Sri Lanka, potential default in Russia, which could trigger contagion elsewhere. Sri Lanka is already down. Who could be next? Well, we looked at the universe of emerging and frontier markets, looking for countries that have high stock of debt, as well as rising interest rates. And we identified 5 countries that could be at risk. So these are Tunisia, El Salvador, Ghana, Ethiopia, and Pakistan. Some of these countries are already struggling economically and have political instability. And others could be next. The worry is these countries are rather small for the global economy. The worry is it starts small and it gets bigger and it moves to other and bigger countries.
Well, I was going to ask you, because obviously one of the questions is always, do we have international resources to help these countries? And we went through COVID and there was really a lack of global coordination around supporting developing countries around that. I mean, there's an effort to get vaccines to developing countries, but it's way behind target. Do we have any chance of having enough money to support the kind of countries that get the number of countries that are going to get into trouble?
Well, that's a big question, right? Because the world is more fragmented today. The lenders are more fragmented. Some of them hold out to debt in the hope of recovering more of their debt. So that's the big question, whether we can have quick restructurings and quick restructuring of debt. And let's take the case of Sri Lanka, for example. Our South Asia economist, Ankur Shukla and Abhishek Gupta, estimated that Sri Lanka needs to make its debt sustainable to prevent it from rising indefinitely. It needs a haircut of about 50%.
So everyone who had lent money to Sri Lanka loses half of their original investment.
Exactly. That sounds quite big.
It sounds pretty bad.
But if you look at the historical episodes of debt restructuring from 1998 to 2010, that's actually in the middle of the range. But also, so Sri Lanka is not an outlier in that sense. But also, if you look at how long it took, the duration of negotiations until they managed to settle debt, it took about 2 years. So it's still early days for Sri Lanka. And if we get others, then it will take us a while to get through this.
Yeah, and you raise a good point that it's just got, there was sort of in the old days, before our time, I think, but, in the sort of 80s debt restructuring, you sort of got the sense you could get there were more or less a handful of big banks that had led to these developing countries in the Latin American debt crisis, for example. And there were governments who later you might have to negotiate with. But now to have investors from all over the globe, and as you say, there's these kind of so-called vulture funds who actually make their money almost from going in and buying up the debt that might get written down and then sort of holding out for the best deal possible. And I guess we should say there's an added wrinkle to this, which I think we'll probably try and focus on in a more detailed way in a future program. But China, as we know, has been lending to a lot of developing countries around the world we haven't necessarily even got a good sense of how much they've lent or on what terms. And that question mark is raised when you're thinking about doing these kind of negotiations. I think they even lent money to Sri Lanka. So that's another complication.
Yeah, and it makes it more difficult to know exactly the size of haircut, what kind of interest rates are being paid. And especially if we look at the economies that are being vulnerable, these are the small sort of frontier economies where already there's a lack of data transparency, and you add another layer of, on the lending side, you don't know who gave what on what terms. That makes it more difficult to actually assess the sustainability of debt in these countries.
And I think it is going to be an issue if China, so far at least, they have not been willing to go in on these multilateral agreements to write down debt, and they've wanted to do their own thing. And I know that's sort of raising eyebrows in the International Monetary Fund, because what if you end up with a situation where Sri Lanka is getting its debt that it owes to other countries and to the IMF written down, but still paying its China debt? It's going to be interesting. I suspect we're going to come back to this. We're going to do a bit of a handbrake turn because we're here in Qatar speaking in person, which is makes a nice change. But I guess you'd have to say if Sri Lanka has been one of the biggest losers outside of Europe from Russia's invasion of Ukraine, Qatar's been a big winner, which doesn't really seem fair given how rich it was to start with. What does this desperate need for Europe to find new sources for its fuel supply mean for Qatar's economy?
It's another slice of luck for Qatar. So if you look at the development of the Qatari economy, they developed their liquefied natural gas facilities, and that drove growth up to 2010. They stopped expanding these facilities, and then they won the World Cup. And the World Cup started a construction boom in Qatar. And you can see it's still here on the streets and everywhere around us.
Everywhere is just building sites.
Exactly. And that's going to happen in November, December. So there's always a question in the last few years is what is going to drive growth in Qatar after the World Cup? And they started expanding their LNG facilities again, liquefied natural gas facilities. The question then in 2017, who's going to buy this? We have the war in Ukraine, and there's so much demand for gas that they can't keep up with demand. So it's another slice of luck in a country that has one of the highest GDP per capita in the world, and that could drive growth for a few years down the line. But it's important to know, so it's not just Qatar that's benefiting from this, it's also its neighbors around here. With high oil prices, with the places like Dubai, places like Saudi Arabia are experiencing a rebound in growth. So this region is booming again on high oil prices.
And of course, there's all the Russians pouring into Dubai. So it's a win-win for everyone here. Well, thank you very much, Ziad. It's true that it wasn't long ago that planes to and from Qatar were banned from even entering the airspace of its neighbours. And football fans and human rights activists were queuing up to complain about that decision to award Qatar the 2022 World Cup. But now the World Cup's almost upon us, and the mood music does feel rather different. Here's Bloomberg's Simone Foxman.
If you fly into Doha from the north, you'll see the two reasons all eyes are on Qatar right now. On your right, a brand new 80,000-seat stadium rising from the desert that will host the final of the World Cup in December. To your left, if you're lucky, you can make out tankers lined up in the Persian Gulf to collect super chilled natural gas. Football and an increasingly indispensable fuel may have little in common, but between them, they could mark a dramatic turnaround in Qatar's fortunes.
The winner to organize the 2022 FIFA World Cup is Qatar.
Nearly since the moment the World Cup was awarded, Qatar's been beset by criticism, first over allegations of corruption in the bidding process, then over concerns about human rights violations, and the decision to move the tournament from summer to winter. For a time, some even speculated that the tournament would be taken away. Here's Lisa Klaveness, the president of the Norwegian Football Federation, delivering a scathing speech in Doha in March of this year.
There is no room for employers who do not secure the freedom and safety of World Cup workers. No room for leaders that cannot host the women's game. No room for hosts that cannot legally guarantee the safety and respect of LGBTQ+ people, coming to this theatre of dreams.
Five months out, there's no longer doubt that the 2022 FIFA World Cup will be held in Qatar as planned. Construction on the country's 7 new stadiums has been completed, and an 8th's been refurbished. But the country is still scrambling to wrap up road projects and make new apartment buildings ready for occupancy, ideally before the games begin. Qatar's government has spent a staggering amount of money on infrastructure ahead of the World Cup. There's the stadiums themselves, of course, but other projects, a metro system, an airport expansion, and the construction of a new planned megacity called Lusail have each cost tens of billions of dollars. Akbar Khan, a senior investment director at Al Rayyan Investment, who's based in Qatar, estimates the government spent over $350 billion ahead of the event.
That money has been spent on essentially, in many cases, building transport infrastructure that was very badly needed. Qatar had already, prior to 2010, the population had doubled over a relatively short period of time, given the earlier expansion in gas, LNG infrastructure and LNG production capacity. So the country hadn't kept up with that growth, and so there was very serious and significant infrastructure bottleneck.
Some of that money is still at work here on the street in Doha's West Bay district. It's not quite 9 a.m., and work on road projects is already starting to slow down. An hour from now, the small army of laborers will have disappeared. That in itself is something new. Public outcry over deaths of low-income construction workers has prompted reforms, including limiting the hours that laborers can spend working outside in the summer heat. It's already 102 degrees Fahrenheit. In a few hours, we'll be 114. Last year, Qatar also introduced the first universal minimum wage in the Gulf. Novel in that it's not based on nationality or gender. It's $274 per month. Other rules have tried to impose workplace safety standards, force companies to pay workers on time, stamp out predatory employee recruitment fees, and allow workers at all salary levels to change jobs without employers' permission. They've had mixed success. Global attention focusing on the World Cup, the uproar likely hasn't ended. Amin Mohseni Cheroglu, an associate professor at American University and a macroeconomist at Atlantic Council, predicts that rising interest in corporate environmental, social, and governance standards, or ESG, may translate into pressure on the ground.
I think there will be some pressure from these companies, and I think that the governments in the region, especially the Qatari government, they will, respond and pay attention to those requests coming from these companies.
Reforms to the labor market aren't just crucial for the low-income workers. If the country wants to make use of all the new apartments and hotels it's built, it has to draw talent and tourists.
We are talking about, probably 1 million of workers are going to leave the country because there is no more, work opportunities for them in the country. So I think it's about that small group of people who are going to stay, and they are going to be mainly in the service industry and a little in the infrastructure and construction.
Diversification, the holy grail of economic stability in the Persian Gulf, as leaders try to prepare their economies for a world that needs less oil and gas. It's also a goal that seems less relevant, with oil and natural gas in short supply after Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Still, Qatar's finance minister, Alia Kouari, warns that the country can't expect the influx of cash prompted by rising energy prices to continue indefinitely.
We have a very disciplined, fiscal policy plan, a medium-term plan for the country. And this is based in a long-term planning and spending, and we are very disciplined about our spending and our fiscal reforms. So we're not changing our plans as a result of these high oil prices.
Qatar is still 5 months away from having this global spectacle on its own soil. But President Putin may have already helped to answer the question of what will support the economy when all the fans have gone home. In Doha, Simone Foxman, Bloomberg News.
Qatar to Sri Lanka, the best of times and the worst in today's global economy. That was this episode of Stephanomics. We'll be back next week. In the meantime, do please rate the show if you like it, and check out the Bloomberg Terminal or news website. It's Bloomberg UK now, in the UK, for more economic news and views on the global economy. You can also follow @Economics on Twitter. This episode was produced by Magnus Henriksson, Summer Sadi and Young. Special thanks to Simone Foxman, Ziad Daoud, Sudhi Ranjan Sen, Anusha Unduchi and Jeanette Rodriguez. Mike Sasso is executive producer of Stephanomics, and the head of Bloomberg Podcast is Francesca Levy.